Your latest article on your website mentions that a one-size-fits-all approach to autonomy will not work. I am curious, what examples do you have on how Kodiak is balancing that AV approach that works with the diverse nature of trucking?
What we do is really, and I will make the example of Maersk, right? Maersk has set out and said their strategy is to move from being seen as a shipping company to being an end-to-end logistics provider. Now, end-to-end logistics means, they have ships, they will have trucks, they will have delivery vehicles, but they don't yet have that huge trucking network, right? They have some extent, but not yet like one of the other large carriers. And so they want to build it. And they say, well, in order to build that, and since I'm building it new anyways, why don't I build it in a way that actually takes autonomous trucks into consideration, that takes the strengths of autonomous trucks into consideration?
Hey everyone, and welcome to our podcast, Caution Wide Right. I'm Luke, your host, and today we're going to be talking about the race to fully autonomous trucking to become a reality with hopes to transform the $4 trillion global freight industry. The aim is level 4 autonomy, meaning full automation without human intervention. If the technology is nailed, then peak hours of travel can be circumnavigated to provide greater assurance on cargo arrival times. Partnered with improved safety of fellow road users, fleets would expect to see more balanced routes and improved safety scores, fuel economy. And of course, truckers are probably hoping for a slower transition of autonomous tech that will leave them plenty of time for operation optimization or new opportunities to rise across the supply chain as this transition happens. Well, we will look at the autonomous trucking industry with help of Michael Wiesinger, the Vice President of Commercialization at Kodiak Robotics, which was founded because they believe autonomous technology will save lives, not just someday, but soon. Michael spent most of his career in the automotive and supply chain industries, working for Detroit Diesel, a Daimler subsidiary, before he joined BCG, where he focused on strategy, operations, and supply chain topics for some of the world's largest automotive OEMs. Michael, welcome to the podcast.
Thanks so much for having me, Luke. Really, really excited to be here today.
Yeah, and so today we see Kodiak trucks from California to Florida, over 2 million miles driven, nearly 4,000 loads delivered with an estimated 1.5 million pounds of freight delivered per week. And additionally, Kodiak has mapped over 18,000 miles of road, or 1/5 of the U.S. interstate system across 14 states. Well, I think there's 30 trucks in the fleet doing more than 50 loads per week, all paid commercial deliveries. Can you give the listeners sort of a rundown of the trucking hubs and what Kodiak is up to today?
Absolutely. So first of all, you did your research well. All your stats line up very nicely. So Kodiak is developing autonomous trucking technology. Now, today, we actually operate a small fleet. We have 33 trucks that are doing development runs as well as commercial runs that are paid deliveries for our customers. So that's where we are today. Most of those runs are done for customers like IKEA, Maersk, and many, many others that I'm sure you have seen publicly. Now, those runs are all done out of our Dallas hub, right? That's where we really have most of our trucks. In California, we do development operations. Now, in the future, we don't want to be our own fleet or carrier. We actually want to use our technology to upfit somebody else's fleet with it and allow them to operate driverlessly. So we really developed this, we call it a turnkey solution that has the technology, the services around it, the network, as you already mentioned, in terms of the maps and everything, and provide that to the fleets so they can then operate autonomous trucks in the future.
Awesome. And so, you mentioned, the technology that will be adaptive. We'll talk a lot about the tech itself. I think your Generation 5 rolled out in April, or at least was announced. But do you see maybe just a handful of trucks joining in the coming months, or do you see the adoption or growth, fleet growth, much quicker than that, more than just a handful in the coming year or two?
Yeah, in general, as I said, we have like 33 trucks, and we believe that's currently a pretty good size for what we need from a development perspective, right? We could, of course, say, we want to have 100 trucks, but it's just not economically, the most rational decision. And so we say that the trucks that we currently have, we will grow them, but it's really a good position to have. Now, when you think about the rollout of actual driverless trucks, right? Today, those trucks are still operated with a safety driver.
Yep.
So in every run that we do on public roads, there's a safety driver in there. On closed courses, we have already done the safety analysis and everything and actually have driverless trucks, but not on public roads. Now, there is a kind of a gradual progression towards doing driverless runs on the road.
Right.
And as we get into 2024, towards the end of next year, you will actually see initial driverless runs on public roads, but again, at a very small scale, because it's a kind of a gradual shift, right? You need to do a lot of analysis when you do that, and you don't just say, oh, okay, tomorrow we're going to go driverless on 1,000 trucks. That's not how it's going to happen. So it's really gradual, and every trucker, that thinks about how fast are those autonomous trucks coming, it's going to be a kind of a slow rollout.
Yeah, and do you see it being more, as this rollout happens, I mean, you can be just staying on the interstate, and then once it's that last mile, is there the driver switch, if you could get the driver out, for example, and then the driver switch and finish that last mile? Do you expect that to be just keep it driverless the whole way through? Or, additionally, the sort of this rollout, so with timeline, obviously you probably focus regional in the south, but then eventually move north, dealing with winter weather and things like that. Is that sort of that slower adoption kind of a thing?
Yeah, let's answer the several of those questions. So the first one is, I think that you're asking is about deployment models.
Yeah.
And there, the industry has mostly talked about what is called kind of a transfer hub approach. At Kodiak, we call it truck ports, right?
Okay.
That is an absolute valid approach that we believe will roll out initially.
Yeah.
But we, from many conversations with customers and different customers groups, have also understood that some of them do not actually want that additional tray or first and last mile, if you will, right? Some of them say, for my specific business, I have very high density and high volume lanes, and I have terminals that are super close to the interstate and actually don't really, have complex driving involved. They say, can you actually get us an end-to-end solution, right? And so this is a second deployment model that we are currently exploring and have made really good progress on in the last 6 months, really. And so we believe, yes, the first rollout will most likely be with a transfer hub approach, but right after that, there will be some lanes. Again, it's not going to be 100 lanes at the same time, but a gradual rollout where we will go DC to DC. Now, at those DCs or transfer hubs for that matter, there will always be humans involved, right? Somebody needs to inspect the truck. Somebody needs to, change the trailer. Somebody needs to make sure that the truck is ready to be launched on its mission. Fueling, of course, is a topic there as well, right? So it's really about, hey, the human will do certain things and then send the autonomous truck on its mission, and that can happen at a transfer hub or directly at the DC, wherever we have what we call this kind of launch and landing area.
And there's a lot that I want. Oh, go ahead.
No, go ahead.
There's a lot there that I'll definitely want to tackle moving forward. You mentioned inspection, and then you also mentioned fueling. So I do want to bring up, obviously, the process of fueling, but you also announced for different types of fueling, for example, that potentially EV trucks is going to be adapting or utilizing Kodiak tech. I'm curious, just what's that transition sort of look like, and what's the benefit using EV?
Yeah, so of course, that transition is happening, right? We all need to be aware that there are certain zero emission targets. And so we want to be able to support that, of course.
Right.
Now, when in many conversations with customers, they have different thoughts on, is battery electric the future, or is it hydrogen fuel cell, right? And so we don't want to prescribe anything. So what we actually did, we took a step back and said, well, our platform or our system needs to be able to work with any platform and any powertrain. And that's really how we have developed it, right? So if we move from an internal combustion engine to an electric engine, it actually only becomes easier for us.
Yep.
Because what you take away is kind of, the transmission that still has some uncertainty on when exactly is the gear shift happening and when do you have a different torque. You don't have that in an electric truck.
Right.
So in fact, for us, it doesn't really matter. It only gets easier with an electric truck. Now, and I always say this, to me, where are you exactly going to use an electric autonomous trucks versus, hydrogen fuel cell autonomous truck is a network exercise. You need to think about which lanes to make sense and which mileage and range can you actually get with those trucks, right? So we're working with the customers and say, okay, where do you want to operate autonomous trucks? And then in the future, where do you want to operate zero emission autonomous trucks? And really define that rollout together with them.
Yeah, it's an interesting transition for sure. And I think we just had was it 2023's, what was it? It was sort of the EV competition of freight delivery. And, you had Tesla Semi in there, you had Daimler's e-Cascadia and a couple others. And, seeing the stats, the real world stats coming out is quite fascinating with that transition. So I'm sure you guys are watching that closely as well.
Yeah, I'm very excited because I would say 2 years ago, everyone would have said, no, absolutely, on the long haul, it needs to be hydrogen.
Right.
And I think with what you currently see, some companies pushing the boundaries there on the range on battery electric, I think you actually might have a viable option with battery electric. Of course, we need to solve the grid and we need to make sure that those charging stations are available, right? We all know it's not that easy. Yeah. But I think there is actually really opportunity on battery electric trucks as well for the long haul.
Yeah, I mean, honestly, the tech transition right now, if you just say 2030, I mean, you got the EV transition, that's 7 years of so much I guess 6 now. We're almost done with 2023 already. But then again, autonomous trucking, autonomous driving in general, what could happen by 2030, it's quite a dramatic potential transition that we're approaching quicker than maybe a lot of our listeners might expect. But I do want to talk about some of the tech as well. So you mentioned, or Kodiak mentioned in April that they announced the 5th generation Kodiak driver, which this is the add-on that you can create and add to any Class 8 truck. It has 28% more sensors, while also eliminating the need for the roof-mounted sensors. 60% CPU performance increase, 130% GPU performance increase. It uses high-quality LiDAR and Ambarella's AI perception system on chip technology for camera data processing. It's quite impressive. I'm just curious, how many Gen 5 tech do you hope to roll out, say, next year or in the coming years?
Yeah, we are in a gradual shift to upgrade the fleet, right? Yeah. We still operate different generations in our fleet, of course. And you have to imagine we are, of course, already working on the next big thing, right?
Yeah,
so to us, it's like we didn't stop at Gen 5. No, we are very actively working on Gen 6, right?
Yep.
And so for us, since we have realized, Gen 6 is actually closer, we actually pulled the timeline in for Gen 6. So we are bringing that out sooner than we might have expected. We actually decided not to upgrade like all 30 to like a Gen 5 or something like that, right? We actually say, okay, we have a couple of them in our fleet in California as well as in Dallas and Texas. But since Gen 6 is coming at some point, let's actually wait and then upgrade more to Gen 6 and not, spend the time and money to actually upgrade the entire fleet to Gen 5. So we always, and I say that in everything that we do, we're always trying to be really, really smart and capital efficient and think about, is this the right thing to do? Maybe this was our plan of record, but is this the right thing to do? And if it isn't, let's actually not do it, right? Let's just shift gears. We are a small company. We're able to do that. And I think that's really something that sets us apart from somebody else.
That's awesome. It's great to hear that. And I know, so even today, so the big macro push of AI in many fields, do you see, or what kind of supply chain concerns do you have, at least in the short term, with the vehicle tech? Obviously, it doesn't sound like it's going to be a mass rollout of the tech, but just the adoption and the tech and supply chains. Do you see that as a concern in the short term, or is that something that can transition pretty smoothly moving forward?
We don't really see it as an issue. So one thing that we do differently than some others is we actually use what we call kind of off-the-shelf components, right? So most of the things that we do, we use chips that anyone else could also buy. Now, there are a few exceptions, but mostly we don't do our own lidars, our own radars, and so on, right? Yeah. We use what's available. And for those things, we actually currently don't see having a big supply chain issue there. Now, I think when you talk about Gen 5 and how that's rolling out, again, right, it's not going to be 1,000 trucks next year. So it's really that gradual rollout. So we have a team working on supply chain. We have a team predicting and forecasting what will that supply chain situation be. And importantly, we are constantly scouting what's the next best thing, right? So for us, constantly evaluating, hey, which lidars, which radars, which cameras are out there, then taking them, testing them, do reliability tests, and only after, thorough analysis, we actually decide, oh, this might actually be a better option. Let's use that sensor. And then, of course, in that decision, also take supply chain certainty into account to make sure we are not running afterwards into a risk of nobody can actually deliver that specific sensor.
And I'm curious, because you guys started in 2018, obviously you're trying to get as much real world data as possible with vehicles. That's the bread and butter. I'm just curious, in 2018, 2019, how much was computerized data or testing done offline based or not in the real world? And are you still continuing that process still today?
Absolutely. Yeah. So off-road or closed course testing as well as simulations are super important, especially simulation, right? Because you can test many, many things in a way cheaper way than actually putting a truck on the road.
Yeah.
So what we do, let's say we going on a run between Dallas and Houston. And between Dallas and Houston, we, of course, whenever there is a disengage or whenever there is a specific event, we record all of that data, right? Mm-hmm. All of that data is ingested into our system and re-simulated. So let's say the driver disengaged for whatever reason. Driver just thought, oh, no, I don't like what the truck did here. I'm going to actually take over. Yeah. We re-simulate and say, what would have happened if the driver had not disengaged? Yeah. In 99.99% of the cases, the truck would just have handled it fine, right? And we say, okay, cool, don't actually need to change anything. In the 0.01%, oh, we actually learn something really important and say, hey, we need to change our system there, right? Yeah. And so constantly when we push a new update to our software, we re-simulate all those scenarios over and over again. And that's really how you do development. That's really the learning that people are talking about, right? You don't just learn by driving on the road. Driving on the road is more like, well, you see how it performs out there and how the driver is kind of satisfied with it, right? Mm-hmm. That's really it. But the learning actually all happens in iterations and simulation and so on.
Exactly. And what I think technology, it's the battle of the nines, right? 99.9%, 99%, 999%, yep. 999%, and getting
exactly.
there. Yeah. And I mean, I've been following the sort of Tesla full self-driving transition. I know their Q3 report mentioned 500 million miles of real world driving data that they've collected, which is crazy to think about. Of course, that's everyday vehicles. I'm just curious, eventually they're going to have the Tesla Semi production ramp up in maybe 2024, more in 2025, probably collecting data themselves for the Semi. I'm just curious, for data collection and autonomy, is there a difference? Do you see a difference with testing a Semi in the real world versus personal vehicles?
Yeah, so we don't operate any personal vehicles on our commercial side. We operate all Class 8 trucks. And also when other companies are talking about mapping and they have their mapping vehicles and driving those highways all over again, we actually don't need to do that.
Good.
So when we collect data, first of all the data that we drive on our semis is collected and stored and resimulated, right? But also when we, let's say, generate a new map, for example, we actually just drive it once. We don't have to drive it all over again, because what is important, our Class 8 trucks that are on the road are all capable of actually understanding, hey, there is an update. For example, there is a new construction zone. Yep. hey, I will let the rest of my fleet know there's new construction zones. So all of those vehicles, those semis that are out on the open road, constantly update everything that our system knows, right? And so this is super important to not just have some random mapping vehicles that can only do, certain things and have its limitations, but actually operate the vehicles that are really equipped with our stack. And that's really the approach that we are taking.
That's awesome. And I'm curious too, since we're still a little bit on the technology, the camera calibrations or anything like that, is that something that can be done without a person there, calibration boards or whatever, or is that a relatively simple process?
Yeah, love that question. So one of the things about Gen 5, and we have done this earlier, but really Gen 4, Gen 5 is where we solidified that approach. We actually, if you look at our sensors, they are all housed in that sensor pod, right? So there are 2 sensor pods, they are housing all those sensors. All those sensors within the pod are intrinsically calibrated to each other. So everything is, the light is calibrated to the camera and so on.
Yeah.
So when you have to, let's say, put a new sensor pod on for whatever reason, you actually take off the old sensor pod, you disconnect 3 cables, data and power, pressurized air, water, put a new sensor pod on. The new sensor pod comes pre-calibrated out of the box. You put that on.
Nice.
It does connect the cables, of course. It does a final calibration to the chassis, and then it's good to go. We actually never before a run have to recalibrate anything. If I talk to our ops team and ask them, when was the last time that you recalibrated the system? They're like, I don't remember. we just don't have to do it because it's such a solid foundation, right? Yeah. That sensor pod is really one unit where all the sensors are housed inside. So this is fundamentally different. And we know, of course, this is a huge advantage compared to some of our competitors to not have to do that. We, of course, check calibrations online, right? Our system, in general, does 1,000 health checks every 100 milliseconds. And those are things like, do I get all the LiDAR data? Do I have any fault code on the CAN bus from the truck? Do I have the right tire pressure? And another one is, do I have the right calibration settings, right? Does everything look correct? So we constantly check it, but barely ever do we have to recalibrate our system, which is, really phenomenal on the approach that our team has taken there.
Yeah, I mean, and you mentioned, having the tech be able to be adopted on any Class 8 vehicle for any fleet moving forward, hopefully moving forward. And that's important because you got maintenance teams, might have their hands on this. Maybe you don't need to have a super specialized tech person managing some of these things. I am curious what kind of training, we're going to go into some of the partnerships in a little bit, but what kind of training do you guys do, whether it's for fleets, maintenance or drivers or maybe even regulatory, inspectors and things like that? What kind of training do you guys use or have these people go through?
Yeah, there are many involved. Actually, just to comment on the changing the sensor part, because it's pretty funny. I'm sure you have seen our video when we worked together with Southern Timeout on actually showcasing that changing a sensor part is faster than changing a tire.
Yeah.
It literally took 9 minutes. And in fact, this was actually a trained actor, right? So this was not somebody we trained over like a month of, hey, this is how you have to change a sensor part. We trained the actor in the morning and then they did it in the afternoon and just completed the task.
Wow.
So that's how easy we actually wanted to design the system and have really achieved to do that. Now, of course, there is some training involved when it comes to, for example, enhanced inspections, as long as you have completed that CVSA enhanced inspection every 24 hours. That's how it's currently written, right? And those are qualified people. There's a certification, there's a program that we have worked together with CVSA and others on really developing that program. And certainly there will be technicians specialized on autonomy, but really most of the things, right? We don't think anyone will go out and change a LiDAR out of that sensor part, right? Our head of hardware always says, well, if that happens, probably afterwards, many more things are not working than before. So we really believe in that. Take off that one sensor part, put it on again, and you're good to go, right? So there's not much training necessary. But of course, there are kind of level 1, level 2, level 3 support that we will have. We are working there with several service providers where we actually say, so Kodiak will most likely not have, several locations with several technicians all over the country. We mostly want to use the ecosystem, want to work with other companies. And so that's what we are actually doing. We work with them and say, what do we need to train your technicians? Because you already have technicians. They are very skilled, right? But what is it in addition that we actually have to do, and work through it with them together? So it's really working together with partners, building this ecosystem of people that are capable of changing things, that are capable of supporting the truck. Also, when it comes to roadside assistance, or whenever the truck has to be towed for hopefully it never happens, but trucks have to be towed for more like engine reasons and things like that. Yep. So we certainly will have trained personnel together with our partners.
And you mentioned some of the inspection stuff and some of these issues that are sort of the day-to-day of trucking. One of the ones I'm always curious about, at least in the short term, what's your thoughts about the future of pre-trip, post-trip, the daily inspections, the DVIR? Do you see it as sort of the truck should return to home so someone's always seeing it? Or you mentioned, I think pilot is the sort of the truck's, what do you call it? The truck...
truck port?
Truck port. So at there, maybe a pilot person or someone else is doing the DVIR for you. Or, do you think that there's enough tech that maybe down the road you don't even have to worry about, like the truck could do the full DVIR itself?
Yeah, so as I said, there's certainly a lot of health checks that our truck already does, yes. Right? It really depends on how much sensors will actually be on the truck in the future. And that's more like an OEM topic than an autonomy topic, right? I think there's certainly a world where you can check everything automatically, right? Everything just by information that is kind of living on the canvas and coming from all the sensors that you have. I think it is there, but I think that it will take some time to actually get to that world, right? Totally. So in the meantime, it's really, yes, we see there are people involved. There are people at those truck ports. There can be a pilot person, a Southern Timer person, many other companies that we work with. There can be a carrier's fleet personnel, right, and maintenance personnel that actually does that DVIR, or even might be enhanced inspection trained, right, and actually does the enhanced inspection, because that's what you essentially want. Again, that enhanced inspection has to happen once every 24 hours. So you need to make sure that the truck passes a location once every 24 hours where that CVSA trained person is available. Now, those trucks will be on the road a lot, right? So we don't expect them to deadhead back because they need to, get a DVIR or need to get an enhanced inspection. And that's why I always say it is all a network exercise. Yeah. And the network exercise is important in order to deploy autonomous trucks efficiently together with our fleets. So we really look at which lanes do you have the volume, the density, and so on, which lanes make sense, which transfer hubs will actually be used on that lane, if any, right? Yeah. And then define together with them to make sure, yes, this is actually going to work at scale as well.
Awesome. So regarding safety, so obviously that's the most important piece with a lot of this transition, safety for on the road, for everyday drivers, professional drivers, no matter what. And that's what we're all about here at CNS as well, is safety and, of course, compliance. I'm just curious, what are the biggest benefits for fleets that are going to adopt AV technology into their fleets? What are some of the biggest benefits that they can see on the safety side?
Yeah, you already mentioned safety is an extremely important one, right? If you look at stats today, 5,800 people are killed every year just related to truck crashes, right? This is a horrific number. It's really high. And so really our goal is, to get that number down to build the world's safest driver. So you will see that our system, again, does like all these health checks. It's constantly monitoring. It constantly monitors the entire environment, right? Now, every truck driver or many truck drivers are trained on the Smith system. And, looking between mirrors, it takes a little. So they don't have a 360-degree view all the time. Right. But that truck will have it all the time. And that's just fundamentally different in terms of what it can see and what it can process, right? So it will be always much more attentive. Yeah. Of course, never gets drowsy, never gets distracted. So that is a huge safety benefit right there. And another one that I think many people don't know, but I think it's really important. that truck will make very smart decisions about, for example, speed. So let's say you get into fog, and let's say dense fog, and the truck actually says, well, I don't see as far as I typically see and as far as I need to see in order to drive at 65 miles per hour. So the truck will say, well, that means, okay, it's going to do a calculation. I need to reduce my speed to 45 miles per hour or something like that, right? So super safe approach, of course. Now, you could say we should do that as well as humans, but I will not exclude myself, right? Very often we don't. Sometimes we do, but very often we have somewhere to get to and some kind of in a hurry. And then we say, oh, I think this actually works. I can drive that speed. The truck won't do that.
Yep.
The truck will just say, no, I'm not comfortable doing that. I will reduce my speed. And it's just a lot of things that many people maybe don't always think about, and I think important to know.
And to add to that, like I don't know if many truckers out there realize, but an inspector or even officer can cite you for not slowing down if the weather conditions they feel you should have slowed down. You should have managed your speed better. You can be cited for that. So if you're not slowing down for heavy rain, fog, or snow, or ice, or things like that, you can be cited. So, and that's the thing that we talk about too with just safety scores in general. If it can prevent more or less accidents, and just the safety in general for the health score of that company with FMCSA. Of course, FMCSA's goals get 0 accidents, right? So it's great to have that kind of partnership with that. But yeah, so maybe even safety scores for carriers can decrease over time. Fuel efficiency, would increase potentially with the autonomous trucks because it's driving more consistently. Do you believe, I'm curious about like the liability and insurance side. So liability might be off the carrier because they can blame the manufacturer or maybe even like Kodiak for the accident. Do you see that as the future where Kodiaks could be liable for issues versus the carrier? And then how would that affect whether it's insurance or just litigation in general?
Yeah, let's come back to the benefit question because I think we only talked about safety, but I would love to talk about the additional benefits.
Please,
on the liability. But on the liability for now, so I always try to explain it in very simple words. And what I say is always, well, today, if there is an accident, God forbid, the carrier has insurance, right? The carrier has insurance that is typically stepping up. They have some reserves that they unfortunately sometimes have to use. Now, the driver doesn't have like a liability or a product liability or something like that, right? So it's really up to the carrier.
Right.
So in the future, with an autonomous truck, you will have that same insurance, cargo and auto and everything that the carrier has today. And let's say there's an accident happening. Now you will have investigation. Investigation will determine, was it a stock truck fault? I don't know, a brake or engine or whatever, right? That didn't work correctly. Or was it an autonomy fault? So let's just assume for a second Kodiak system was not working properly as it should have been working. We will actually have product liability to step in for that. And that's fundamentally different compared to what you have today. So I always say the situation actually gets clearer. And in addition to that product liability, in addition, what you will actually see is there's no discussion anymore about what happened. We have camera data, we have radar data, LiDAR data. We always just press play and can say, this is exactly what happened, right? We don't need to discuss what exactly happened. And I think this is a fundamental change when it comes to accidents and how those things will be recreated and everything. There's just so much more data and so much more information available. It will be pretty simple to determine what has been happening.
Right. Totally. And then you mentioned other benefits that you see with autonomous vehicle transition. What others would you want to add to that list?
Yeah, so it's so important. You touched on sustainability, and the common talking points that most AV providers and industry talks about is the truck will drive smoother and more consistent. And I fully agree. This is definitely going to happen, and this will have some impact. Now, I will actually take that a step further. And it goes back to kind of a network exercise, because think about the deadhead that you have today. Deadhead related to, let's say, the driver needs to get home or wants to get home, or other reasons, right? Let's just assume we don't have the driver in there anymore, and they can actually reduce your deadhead.
Yeah.
Deadhead is 10 to 15% of all miles driven, sometimes even more, right? It really depends on the network that carriers have built. So that's a huge savings for cost as well as emissions if we can actually take out some of them. Let's talk about out of route miles, right? Sometimes the truck does not always drive where it's supposed to drive because somebody wants to use a different gas station than what's actually on the routing plan. So out of route miles, those are not officially reported, but it's a significant portion as well, right? So let's assume we can actually take away some of those out of route miles. Again, huge savings in cost, but also huge savings in terms of less fuel consumption and carbon emissions. And then the last one, I think this is an important one, idling. Today, of course, there's a lot of idling. If you look at the stats, it's like, I think on average, 1,500 gallons per truck per year. This is a huge number. And why is this happening? Of course, because you need to cool the cab during hot days, and you need to heat it during cold days, and so on. If there's no driver in there anymore, do you need that idling? Do you even have the truck idling somewhere, or is it actually just mostly running on the road, right?
Yeah.
And so again, if you take that away, the sustainability benefits are just far beyond what anyone is talking about. And I think it's so important to educate the industry and to educate listeners on really those benefits. And then one that we haven't yet talked about at all, maybe for some carriers, even the most important benefit is being able to grow the capacity and the revenue that they're hauling. Right? Let's say that truck doesn't drive 7 hours per day as it's currently, but like 20 hours per day, right? Well, you can hold so much more freight. You can actually expand your top line and you expand your company valuation. So I think this is just fundamentally important to understand that safety is the most important thing, but really that additional revenue, that additional sustainability benefits is actually really making a compelling story for autonomous trucks.
It's a crazy future we're approaching into.
It's exciting, for sure.
And there's so much, like we've had other people on talking about other vehicle tech and in-cab tech and all the sensors and things like that that are around in a vehicle. It's just impressive. I'm curious, so obviously the transition to autonomy is going to take some work as the transportation industry is extremely diverse. A lot of unique networks, operations, service and maintenance processes, TMS systems, and so much more. And I believe your latest article on your website mentions that a one-size-fits-all approach to autonomy will not work. I am curious, what examples do you have on how Kodiak is balancing that AV approach that works with the diverse nature of trucking?
Yeah, super important. I mean, if you look at the customers that we work with, right, it's like shippers with a private fleet, it's carriers, it's kind of logistics platform providers. So it's really working with all of them to understand all the aspects of their business and how we can provide value to them. Now, our main customers in the future will be the carriers or anyone who operates a fleet, really, right? But we work with IKEA just to understand what autonomous trucks can do for them and then bring in a carrier to actually do it. So what we do is really, and I will make the example of Maersk, right? Maersk has set out and said their strategy is to move from being seen as a shipping company to being an end-to-end logistics provider. Now, end-to-end logistics means, they have ships, they will have trucks, they will have delivery vehicles, but they don't yet have that huge trucking network, right? They have some extent, but not yet like one of the other large carriers. And so they want to build it. And they say, well, in order to build that, and since I'm building it new anyways, why don't I build it in a way that actually takes autonomous trucks into consideration, that takes the strengths of autonomous trucks into consideration? Yeah. And so that's what we do with them, right? We define where in their network building exercise, where do autonomous truck make sense? what do you want to haul with human drivers in the future versus what do you want to haul with autonomous trucks. So it's really working hand in hand. And then it's so funny that you said like the TMS, right? And it's so diverse. So what we actually do with all of them, Maersk was just one example, but all of our official partners that are part of the partner deployment program, we actually work through all these steps. Analyze the network, analyze their systems, like which fleet management systems, transport management systems, what do we have to integrate with?
Right.
In fact, we have just launched our first fully integrated, fully TMS integration and first operations deployment that actually leverages that, which is super exciting.
Yeah.
Now we understand that there are different transport management systems, a lot of homegrown systems out there, right? We all know that. So we basically build an API that is able to integrate with all of those. And that's just, again, since it's so diverse, you need to take a step back, kind of abstract things, build the right things, like kind of an abstract API layer, and then do a little work to do the final integration into those specific systems. But it's really about being smart what to build and where, you can just leverage what's already out there.
Yeah, totally. And so you mentioned, these different partnerships. I know that you have a partnership development program. People that are part of that, you've mentioned IKEA, but you got Werner, Maersk, 10 Roads, Siva Logistics, US Express, Tyson. I'm just curious, sort of looking in the timeline, can you what's your expectation in the growth of those partnership programs, short term and long term?
Yeah, it's really, so today, for most of those, we haul freight on, a daily basis, mostly, or 4 to 5 days a week. And we have done that since actually quite some time. For some of them since a year, for some of them it's newer, and we're just establishing like long-term operations. And then what we want to do with them is really, in those operations, actually set it up in a way as if it was already driverless. So already doing the enhanced inspections, already doing everything, all the processes that are needed around it to operate autonomous trucks. And so then once we actually are able to take out the driver on these commercial runs, it's basically just flipping a switch and saying, oh, we have already done everything. Now we can operate driverless trucks. At that point, it will be a small scale, right? There will be a couple autonomous trucks running for them, not like hundreds immediately. Then we will say, okay, let's say this is the first lane. There are a couple of trucks running. Let's add a second lane. Let's add a third lane. Let's add a couple of trucks here and there. And then really, after we have like a few of those lanes, a few of those deployments, and learned a lot, right? There's so much that we have to learn. Yeah. We don't want to scale too quickly because we still have to improve things. And once we say, okay, this is now really ready to go, then we scale it across the country and of course across fleets and the trucks that they have with us.
And as far as timeline, I know that's everybody's big question, whether it's an investor or just general. Do you see driverless AV happening in trucking by 2030 in some regional capacity? Do you what would be the growth goal, internationally as well?
Yeah, I'm 2030 and 100%. So we will do our first driverless runs by the end of next year. And then the first driverless commercial deliveries are currently planned for the following year.
Wow.
So now, as you said, 2030, by 2030, we actually see a fairly decent penetration of the lanes that we have, the trucks that are actually running now. I will not quote any numbers or anything like that.
That's fair.
But yes, absolutely, you will see those. Now, you mentioned internationally. Absolutely. Today we have to focus on the US. The market is huge, right? I think we can really do so much change about safety and so on with autonomous trucks just in the US. But we have a lot of inbound requests from countries like Australia, Brazil, India, Europe, of course, all countries that have the same driver shortage issue, right? That like really exists everywhere, same safety concerns. So yes, we absolutely see this being a global business, but have to focus on the US so far and then roll it out globally later.
And do you see any regulatory hurdles, at least in the US? So obviously California, it was very close to a legislative law being passed to like prevent autonomous driving trucks in California. Governor Newsom just vetoed that to allow it to happen. But who knows? Do you expect that law, which went through the House relatively quick, the legislative process relatively quickly, do you expect that kind of debate happening across states moving forward? Do you expect some kind of pushback, slowdown, or what are some of those legislative hurdles or compliance hurdles that you have to worry about?
Yeah, so generally, if you look at the US today, there are 40 states, a little bit over 40 states that actually allow driverless testing for autonomous trucks.
Right.
And 23 of them that already allow driverless deployment. So literally in Texas, we could go driverless today. There's no hurdle anymore. Now, this is not a federal framework. It's really a state-by-state framework, but it allows us. And if you look at lanes like Dallas to Atlanta, which we drive on a daily basis, all of the states in between actually have that regulatory framework that would already allow autonomous trucks. So I don't see big hurdles from that perspective. Now, talking about California, we of course very much appreciate that Governor Newsom made the right decision, the decision for technology, for safety, and so on, and really improving the safety of roadways, which I think is very important.
Yeah.
You actually have seen there were bills in other states before that. All of them have been shut down immediately, right? And I think that's really what's going to happen if anyone would run some of those bills again. I think they will be shut down very quickly because people realize this is actually solving a real issue, making roadways safer, right? And so I really think we need to think about the bigger picture, not just like, oh, we want to prevent innovation. I don't think that's the right way to think about it. And we are honestly not too concerned that there will be huge regulatory hurdles from that perspective.
Good. I mean, it's a data game, so if you can show it's safer, regulators are going to be like, it's the data. Is the data.
Yeah, it's hard to argue against safety. Yes, I would agree.
So again, I know our time's almost up, but I do have another hurdle question that I am curious about, and that, of course, is macroeconomics. So obviously, we just saw in the trucking industry, Convoy, it's a load board. They closed due to the massive freight recession that's happening, and of course, the contraction in the capital markets. You've got interest rates that are really high, and a Fed that's like, we're going to wait a little longer on high interest rates before backing off of it. We also see that, the other autonomous truck companies out there, many of them, I think there's been 8, it depends on how you count them, 8, 9, 10 of them. 3, 4 of them have shut down. You've got Otto, Startski, Robotics, Peloton, Locomotion, different approaches, of course. You got Too Simple, who's like, I'm out of the U.S. We're going to go focus somewhere else, and their stock crashed, kind of a thing. I'm just curious. Obviously, self-driving, it's coming and it's expanding very, very fast. Do you see the macroeconomics as a hurdle for Kodiak, and at least in the short term? And what is that scary, issue? And do you see Kodiak being able to be fine moving past it?
The short answer is no, because we are really differentiated from our competition. Mm-hmm. If you look at Kodiak, we have from the very beginning said, this is a marathon, not a sprint. So you need to be capital efficient, yes. Right? We call it Spackapalooza. 2 years ago, when everyone went like public, yeah. Without revenues, without profit, without secular growth, we were like, yeah, this isn't the right thing for us to do right now, right? This just doesn't make sense. And so we always said, we are focusing on the best talent, not the most talent, right? We want to have the right people. We don't say we need, several thousands of people.
Right.
And so we always stayed nimble and small, and I think that has really, really helped us. And so it's fundamentally different approach. Now, if you think about the general macroeconomic, is there a downtrend? Absolutely. Is there a freight recession? Absolutely. But just think about it. Those things happen all the time, right? There's a freight recession every couple of years.
Yep.
And any carrier that you talk to, they're like, yeah, this is our business. It's happening. We know it's going to go up again, right? So long term, if you have discussions with them, everyone sees, this is what it is right now. But we know freight volume is going to go up again.
Yep.
So we will have to transport more volume. So we will need autonomous trucks to actually do it because we don't have enough drivers to take care of it.
Exactly.
Right. So when you talk to any carrier, nobody's like really concerned about that. Now, of course, today everyone has, hey, I need to focus on, running my business right now, and spend some time on autonomous trucks. But then, next year, when we are hopefully over the hump, everyone is like, okay, now how quickly can we actually roll out autonomous trucks, right?
Exactly.
That's really the conversation that we're having. In addition, I don't know if you know, but one thing that we did last year, we won a military DoD contract, right?
Yep.
And that is another very recession-proof use case where we identified that we can actually utilize our technology with very, very minor addition. Mostly we can't just use our technology. We call it dual use technology, and you will see that really promoted from the Army, from the private industry, this dual use, which makes a lot of sense. So that's another stream where we say, that's really helping us because it is recession proof and it will always be there.
Awesome. Well, obviously, this has been an amazing conversation. Do you have any other closing thoughts, any other takeaways that you want to make sure the listeners come from with this interview?
I think it's just important for everyone to realize autonomous trucks are real. Whenever somebody gets into a truck and gets a ride and the truck does just all of it, they're like, oh, yeah, this is actually happening today. So everyone who has the opportunity, I encourage to read up on it, come for a visit, talk to us, because this is happening sooner than many people expect.
Awesome. Well, thank you for this incredible conversation, Michael. Thanks for joining me today. If you want to follow Kodiak's growth more closely, you can go check out the link that we're going to have in the bio below to their website. They keep a lot of information up, announcements and stuff on their website, as well as their YouTube channel. They've got a lot of FAQs that I know are going to be coming out. And a lot of really impressive video, which I might actually overlay a little bit in our podcast. But go check them out. Go subscribe to their channel and follow them. If you enjoyed this conversation, be sure to like the video and subscribe. We have a lot more great conversations and discussions coming down the road, as well as we always talk about safety and compliance and trucking news in general. So be sure to hit that like and subscribe. And if you need any help with fleet safety scores now, we are here to help, as we're the experts with trucking and compliance in this industry. And with that, thank you for watching, and as always, stay safe out there.